We've got our final presenter, Mr. Ahmed Imran Aslam, or unless, are you a doctor? If I, oh, okay. So Mr. Ahmed Imran Aslam, he's an environmental specialist at the World Bank. He heads the bank's work in Punjab. The bank's work on air quality in Punjab, as well as the multi-million-dollar Punjab Green Development Fund. So I guess you hold the purse strings for these guys. Okay, so over to you.
So let me tell you something. Before I start the presentation, I'll go along and I'll tell you how Dr. Saab talked about interaction with India that has to be with the with Foreign Office. So I was here in Lahore having a couple of meetings when I get a call from country director saying, can you come to Islamabad tomorrow, because there is a meeting in which I have been asked to present about air pollution case to the MNAs and senators. Can you represent me? And I said, yeah, sure. So as most of you know, that when it doesn't rain in Lahore for a couple of weeks, months, the dust settles on trees and you can see कि वो कितने गंदे हैं. So just before leaving, I cut a branch of a tree and took it with me. And I told the senators and MNAs, can you just look at this thing I circulated at the start? And then I asked them, do you know what this is? So somebody said this tree, somebody said that and that. I said, no, this is X-ray of your lungs. This is what you are breathing in. And then I went on to make a presentation in which I said it doesn't really matter what your growth figures are, but let me tell you the numbers. I had one slide with only two numbers. I said, this is your budget for this year. These are the estimates of environmental degradation. And you will see that the environmental degradation numbers are bigger than your national budget. So what development are we talking about? These percentages don't mean anything. So then came COVID, and in COVID we had online. We have two annual meetings. One is the spring, the other one is annual meeting. So it was annual meeting in which we pitched to the vice president for the region. We told Haq that let's present the air quality as a case. So there was only one meeting for the South Asia region, which was chaired by Haq, our regional vice president, and he invited finance ministers, not environment. He invited finance ministers from all countries of South Asia, which was India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives. This is the region. And he said, we want to make air quality #1 agenda. The reason why he said that, because if you look at it in this slide, do we have a pointer? You see this entire red thing is one air shed, which starts from here and goes over there. So we told Haq that we will not be able to improve air quality unless we tackle everybody together, or unless we take entire region together, because it's same air shed. So regardless of whatever you do, if you bring it only project in Pakistan or India, it's not going to happen. We won't be able to have an impact. So we said, okay. And he said, fine. It was unfortunate where finance ministers of each country attended. Here, it was delegated to environment advisor. It was good that environment advisor, please don't get me wrong, it was good that the environmental advisor was there, but the importance that we wanted to bring in finance ministers, because we wanted them to commit X percentage of national budget will go towards improving air quality. But anyhow, that was a successful event, which then led to, we told Haq that we will not be able to, because there is lack of cooperation between India and Pakistan. At that time, in 2018, when your student Irfan Aslam was leading uh, negotiation with World Bank Continuous Water Treaty, so the conditions were very tough. So said this is the only way we can do it, that we do it individual countries. We have program in individual countries, and then we can bring them together. And Heart agreed, and so we are working on a program where we will have it. But if you look at it over here, see, the potential is that what we want to do now is get rid of this black red cloud, and this is the target we want to do by 2030. So our 2018 to 2030, 12 years, we can do it. All we need to do is work on reducing not only PM 2.5 but CO2, black carbon, methane, and it will eventually save about 450 lives. There was earlier somebody from who was sitting behind had said that there are health impacts. Yes, there are health impacts. Unless we acknowledge that, it will not work. That's one of the things that we always work with finance ministry, to tell them that these are the numbers that you will save. You may build more hospitals, but the impact will not be there because you will increase the number of patients. What you need to do is actually work towards reducing the number of patients. So you are looking at a different thing. Unless you identify the main causes and factors, you won't be able to achieve that. As a result of that 2020 annual meeting event, if you look at it, all the countries agreed that by 2030, we should be targeting to achieve WHO interim standard 1, which is the red line over here, which you see. Now here you see the different other territories. This is basically, this Punjab is Indian Punjab, this is Pakistani Punjab. If you look at it, this is where their current exposure in 2018 was. So all of those countries, this is our exposure. So though on the other side of the border, they have to do a lot more work than what we have to do. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to do work, because this will not help us to achieve, this will not WTO standard, interim standard 1, unless we start fully implementing the measures that we have. So red is the one that relates to the current measures that we have, and thank you, sir, for bringing it to the limelight, that they have these measures, but the implementation is still a long way to go, which will actually help us. If we fully implement, we'll be able to achieve that. And then because of the cross-border, you can see that we can go and achieve interim target number 3 as well, which is slightly less than what our standards are. Last month, actually earlier this month, we presented this to Umar Saab as well, and a number of, Umar Saab is smiling because he can recognize this slide. So we presented this, and there was this discussion. We presented this to a number of government departments and officials, and they, even including EPD, they felt that these numbers were not correct. And we said, fine, doesn't really matter. What matters is that these are the problems that we have. These are the sources we have till now. What we have been doing is that we have not looked at the most scientific way of doing it. Urban Center did that, and they used the same model that has been used over here, which is the Gaines model, but they didn't look at the cross-border from other territories. And if you look at over here, we find that the pollution from rest of the country is quite significant. From other countries is even more, but from within the Punjab, it is this, and all of this adds up to this. one thing that we wanted to highlight was that in this, if you look at it, most of these things are your personal choices. Residential, which is basically cooking. Mobile sources is basically transport. These are your personal choices that we as the citizens or we as humans take. And unless we start taking these or making more environment friendly choices, we won't be able to make any progress. Here we see that 23% as per our, and we are going to review because there is a concern that 23% is a very high number coming from residential sources. So we are under the EPD, Secretary EPD Saab was kind enough to form a committee which is actually which has members from academia, from research, who are actually looking at these data to actually assess how much fine-tuning we can do, because what we intend to do is by next year launch a program for air pollution. We expect it to be between 150 to 200 million dollars. This was the phase 2 of Punjab Green Development, which is $200 million program that our colleagues from sitting in front of me are implementing. So it's important that we realize this thing, that we must know from where it is coming. The main thing is that there are the secondary pollutants basically react. So for example, ammonia reacts with SOx and NOx to form secondary PM 2.5, which to date we don't exactly know what those numbers were till we did this gains model, and it helped us to identify. But I think a proper source apportionment, Adam, you also talked about source apportionment, there were other studies as well, but we actually need to have a more scientific way of doing source apportionment, study a primary, because right now the studies that we have rely on the secondary data. We don't have the primary data. If you look at it over here, you see this, because of the lighting, there is a slight, the difference between black and red is slightly, but 2018 legislation or the policies that we have, this is, if they are fully implemented, this is what will have an impact. But if you look at it over here, there is no legislation on clean cooking. It's not going to, and this is the largest bar chart that we have. And what we need to do is, and when we go on to the next, I think I don't have that, no, I don't have that chart, where we have this cost effectiveness, that how easy it is to actually, cost effective it is to bring about clean cooking. But then again, this is a personal choice. Our experience from bringing in clean cooking stoves in different parts of the world has been that it's very difficult. So give you one example, in Mongolia, we actually had to bring in a priest into the household, into the kitchen to bless a stove, because they had the belief that stoves, certain type of stoves, keeps the bad spirits away. So you're dealing with cultural thing over here. We are dealing with cultural aspects, so it's important that we realize, and that's the message that we want to do. Waste incineration, you can see that we need other measures as well. The current policy will not have that much an impact. You go down through it and you start realizing that power sector, transport, industrial emissions, diesel gensets, again cars and two-wheelers, these are the way you have the current legislation. But if you look at it, our legislation is not complete, and we will not be able to improve air quality unless we do that. I don't buy this thing that we are living in a Punjab, that Lahore or Peshawar is one of the most polluted cities. I think what we need to realize is that the entire region is. very polluted. And we, as a region, as personal, and we need to change our personal preferences if we want to make an impact. Otherwise, nothing will get done.
All right, Aslam Saab, I have to give you a time warning here. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
this is my last slide. This is the normally, what time is it? 1 minute? Can you have 1 minute?
If you can just wrap up. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the model that we do. So there are 9 things we need to do. There's protocols, there's monitoring, there's also we need to develop emission inventory, source apportionment, which then leads to basically AQ planning. So with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you, Dr. Saab.
Okay, thanks. Open the floor to discussion. Hassan Saab mentioned how he's an optimist and like sees the the glass half full. I, like my Gen Z successors, for some reason I'm a pessimist. So, but we'll have the discussion in the spirit of what Hassan Saab believes in, and kind of focus on sort of concrete things that we can do, so that, or steps that we can collectively kind of brainstorm, so that the next time we convene and chat, we can come back to those points and see if we've made any sort of marginal gains in that period. So with that, I open the floor to comments and questions. Nazish?
Transport sector, which we've seen in the earlier session, contributes about 85%. I mean, the estimates really vary, but in the cities, that is the largest contributor. And then smog, the concentration of smog is, of course, also, I mean, it's air pollution is bad everywhere, as you mentioned, but it's concentrated in the cities. So I wanted to ask about that. I am aware that obviously, as research and source apportionment is becoming more and more sophisticated, maybe that data is new, but just curious to hear your thoughts on that. And the second question for Ahmed Saab, you talked about personal preferences and culture. What I've observed, at least, is both things are very changeable and they respond to incentives. So if there is piped gas coming to your house and that is more convenient, that's inexpensive, you will make that the shift in that direction. Does that kind of, or changes in regulation, does that feature into the work that when you're thinking about these kind of behavioral adaptations of people's preferences?
So, what is your point in, like, sort of, how do you see this sort of? नहीं, वो मेरा सवाल था, वो मैंने उसके ऊपर डाल दिया अपना, हाँ. Yeah, no, it's, yeah, anyways, yeah.
You know, this is an issue that really haunts all of us as lawyers, कि जो suo motu jurisdiction courts करते हैं, they encroach on the executive domain. ये बाल बिल्कुल दुरुस्त है. There is a trichotomy constitutionally between the executive, legislature and the judiciary. I think it's written to be respected. But the reason it has not been respected as much as he would like to see it respected is this. There is a total apathy, indifference of the legislature and the executive to some of the issues that the judiciary takes note of. I'm a great defender of the suo motu jurisdiction. Internationally, I'm criticized in international fora कि नहीं यार, अगर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन नहीं कहती तो तू क्यों कहता है कि उसको करना चाहिए, एग्जीक्यूटिव को करना चाहिए. मैंने कहा मेरे मुल्क में एग्जीक्यूटिव नहीं करता, लेजिस्लेचर नहीं करता, और अगर सुप्रीम कोर्ट उन फील्ड्स में अंदर आती है जहां देयर इज एन एपैथी. So I think I welcome it from that perspective. It has been a huge blessing for Pakistan, particularly the environment. Minus Shala Zia, we would be 20 years into this struggle. And I think what has happened is not because the Supreme Court or the High Courts are anxious to come in and do things, but वो जब निकलता है जज अपने घर से, by the time he gets to the Supreme Court or the High Court, रास्ते में जो हालात देखता है, solid waste disposal देखता है, बाकी चीज़ों की देखता है, तो कहता है कि नहीं हो रही. Then he steps in because the others haven't done. You see, while I have the mic, I want to mention something that I do want to acknowledge while Umar is here. You know, I've written a book on all the commissions that I've chaired, तो पहला जो मेरी कहानी है वो लाहौर की कहानी है कि लाहौर में एक इलाके में जहां अस्पताल था, जहां रिहायशी इलाका था, because I started working in the environment long time ago, so people would write to me as if I was some kind of an ombudsman. तो मुझे आया कि जी आप हमारे इलाके में आए. I go there and I saw women come out of the houses and say, look, हम इस इलाके में रहते हैं, ये सामने हमारे घर हैं, बच्चों को सुबह 7 बजे उठाते हैं स्कूल जाने के लिए, ये दूध का ग्लास भरते हैं, इनको कपड़े पहनाते हैं, by the time he gets to the दूध वो काला हो चुका होता है because of the pollution. So I got all the people, and my experience is people are very responsive if they are doing something wrong. उन्होंने कहा जी हम इसका कुछ करने को तैयार हैं. तो I had a choice of agitating it in a court of law. I'm not a confrontationalist. I try to find a consensus क्योंकि confrontation में झगड़ा खत्म नहीं होता, अपीलें होती हैं. तो वो मसला जब मैंने देखा तो एक चीफ सेक्रेटरी था लाहौर में, उसको मैंने फ़ोन किया, मैंने कहा मैं तुझे मिलना चाहता हूँ. उस चीफ सेक्रेटरी का नाम था परवेज़ मसूद, Umar's father. And I said, look, this issue has come up. I've personally witnessed the tragedy of families. It should not happen. If you don't fix it, I'll have a court direct you to fix it. कहते relax. We'll take care of it. So that was the first lesson I learned as an environmentalist, not to be a confrontationalist, approach the decision makers. They are human beings like you. उनकी भी बीवी है, उनकी भी बेटी है, उनकी भी माँ है, उनके भी घर है, उनके भी हालात हैं, और 80% आपके मसले हल हो जाते हैं. So I wanted to acknowledge as a tribute what Parvez Masood did to me in my professional life. He gave me my first fix. I went back and this is reported in my book. So thank you for that opportunity.
Amna, you want to address Nazish's question, and then Asam Saab, I think that there was a comment for you too. Yeah.
So Nazish, just briefly, so the Smog Commission actually had like some actions which were kind of overarching. So one of them was to implement the Pakistan Clean Air Act. So that had provisions for the transport sector in there. And at that time, there were other things going on, which I'm not sure what stage they're at now, which was the development of vehicle inspection centers across Punjab. So most of them were established, but I think they were confined to just one vehicle inspection center, which was meant for just the public transport. And I think the project kind of ceased somewhere in the middle, but the initial plan had been to expand that to private vehicles as well, and that would have actually helped a lot. And I think there was a discussion earlier that one of the gaps that is found and that all vehicles would fail, which is probably why it didn't happen, is because the fuel that we're still getting is obviously of a poor quality. So it was addressed, but maybe not directly, it was more an indirect one.
Yes, of course. Simple answer. It's not that simple because, you know, we need to work with the government. We are there at the request of government. We don't come on our own, but we do promote certain things, and we need to agree with the government on the parameters of the new program. We would like to work in 4 sectors, which is transport, clean cooking, agriculture, and I forgot the 4th one. So we have put forward this is what we want to do, and yes, we do want to create awareness. We do want to bring in cultural change, but it's not that easy to bring about a cultural change. It's easier said than done that if gas is available, there is no gas. So the option of burning gas is not there. And let me tell you, when you go home, and if you have a chance, monitor PM 2.5 when you're burning gas. The kitchen will be the most polluted place in your home. it's such, the PM 2.5, it's so high that you talk about 500, it's nowhere even near 500. So it's not that there are no easy solutions per se, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try.
नुमैर मैं ज़रा उमर साहब का सवाल ले लूँ फिर ओके
Well, my is more an observation about, first of all, these judicial commissions. Urban unit has been summoned time and again by judicial commissions, more to give them a professional input of if they are seeking information. What is the worth of that exercise? I can tell you that uh, in a very positive way, that provides us the space to discuss something which we do not get that space in the bureaucracy or in the world that we live in as civil servants. We just don't have, we have not created space for EPD to come up with an innovative project or intervention or something. I mean, the EPD agenda is always last whenever there is a development meeting. In fact, it is made such that, EPD day has to be separate because their projects are always very problematic and complex and hard to understand. So what the judicial commissions have actually done is allowed us some space to talk about what we are doing, and they are also empower us uh, to take our recommendations and implement them. I would give you the example of what has happened with the Lahore master plan. Although that is not directly related to environment, but it will have an impact on environment. Um, we were called and we were asked that what are we doing about the Lahore master plan, and we said we had nothing to do with the Lahore master plan. So the judge asked us that what is your role and what have you been doing in the past. So we sort of exhibited exhibit 1 or exhibit 2, our reports and everything. And lo and behold, that while none of the civil service colleagues have ever read any of our reports, the Honorable Justice took time over the week to read them up. And then he was, very laudatory of the work that the urban unit had actually done. And uh, it has sort of involved the urban unit in reviewing the Lahore master plan. Now that is a professional space, because what it has attracted is a lot of professional interest that if the Lahore master plan is being reviewed, it is not being reviewed to actually pin blame on somebody, while that is an aspect which is being played in the media, but it is also being reviewed that to see whether the master plan is of a good quality. So if you want quality discussion, if you want to talk about these things at a higher forum than what in which we are actually currently present, I think the higher judiciary has offered us this opportunity. My own role has been a very mixed one in that, because I do not want to alienate my colleagues in the civil service also, because they are, as far as a target of criticism whenever performance of departments is actually discussed. But at the same time, as Dr. Saab also mentioned, we have to first of all at least reach a consensus on the fact that we will be working for public good. uh, I think this idea of a commission or members getting together, even private sector members getting together for public good, is much different than the World Bank jargon, which is stakeholder consultation, which is basically what is my stake in this. I'm not arguing about my stake in this, I'm talking about public good. So you have to frame this issue differently. You have to talk about it in more of a religious sense than anything else. That this is public good, this is what we have to do collectively, rather than sort of argue out that what is your stake in it and what is my stake in it. Because if I do it that way, I will be framing the problem in a totally different way. If I do it in a public good domain, I would be framing the problem in a very different way, and my selection of people in the commission would be much different. So, I think what Dr. Saab has pointed out is that we, as a younger generation, perhaps have moved away from this idea of public good altogether. We are looking at problems and trying to find solutions of problems, but we don't have a premise or a principle on which we are actually banking those solutions. In the olden days, even the civil service had its own meaning of public good. Well, at that time, they did not want to, have anybody else define what public good is. But civil servants of that age, and because I'm a son of one, they had a very clear definition of what public good is. And because if you have a clear definition of what public good is, you'll get things done. If you are not clear about the premise on which you are basing your action, that is where we will run into confusion. And right now, the environment debate is in that gray area. So we can make it very technical, like you have seen in some of the presentations, or we can sort of crystallize it and make it very simple so that we can involve those actors who are just interested in asking us what can we do to help you out. And that includes a very large number of bureaucrats and civil servants who are not interested in looking at the data. They are more interested in asking you what is our role in it and how do we actually contribute to it. So, when we are, and because we are wrapping this thing up, when we are concluding these things, when we are asking ourselves how to frame this issue in the future, I think we have to bring this element of public good and simplifying this thing, much more. So, it has to work at two different planes. The technical plane is a different plane, and the public good plane is a different plane altogether. And we have to be very careful not to jumble these things up, because it is happening with us right now between the World Bank and the urban unit. I saw their presentation, and once they left the room, I had my team and I said, from where did the cooking stove come in? Now are we going to go into households and trying to check cooking stoves? So all of a sudden, a very sort of good work by the World Bank falls into a public policy domain, and our general consensus was that the problem has become more complicated than before. And I really believe that what these judicial commissions do is they force you to simplify the problem. They force you to look at something in a public good domain. And that is what is important. It is not being looked at in the government domain like the way the judicial commissions are actually looking at it. We might not like their interference. I personally do not like their interference, because they sometimes call me up directly and say that I have to appear in the court and this and that. Abid Shah Hussaini is sitting there. He is my front man as far as the judicial commissions are concerned, because he's got a very better temperament as far as court appearances is concerned. I tend to lose control and I don't want to, and my lawyer has advised me that you sit back. You actually go to, because you become overtly emotional. Abid Saab is very good at listening to the court, but even I, being very critical of interference of the judiciary, I really believe that they are able to move the needle. So, one is the technical discussion, which is very good and we should be talking about. The other is a more fundamental discussion that has the plane shifted, like the Shaila Zia case shifted this plane, and we are talking more about it as a right. I'm saying that the next second generation of judicial commissions would be much more focused. They would be much more demanding, but we should not let go of that space, because I can't find the alternative space in the civil service. So that's my 2 cents on it. Thank you.
Numair, yeah, go ahead.
And we see that every year, because of air pollution, 28,000 people die in Pakistan. There are like 40 million cases of acute respiratory diseases. There are like hundreds and thousands of days of labor force missed, which shows that this problem is much, much bigger than we realize. And we have seen that some of the responses that we got when there was dengue, when there was malaria, from the policymakers, from international agencies, that response has been missing when it comes to air pollution. Nobody talks about air pollution that way. There should have been maybe a public health emergency looking at the impact of this problem, but there isn't. And it's kind of appalling to see that all of this is happening and is going unnoticed, because maybe you don't see the impact in a day or two. You realize it over a longer period of time, but we kind of all seem to miss it, and more so at the policy level. My second observation question is to Dr. Samal and Shotaro. The research project that went on in Lahore and looked at the need for information by the people when they want to know about the quality of air pollution. I think, or maybe you guys also have planned a follow-up to this. We recently came out of a pandemic. People had a lot of people were using masks. They were conscious about what when they were going out, doing it. Does that behavior continue looking at air pollution when people see that the air quality is bad? Is there a willingness to put on masks or take some precautions? Because we have that capability in Pakistan. Pakistan developed so many masks. There are industries that are producing them. So maybe we can try and minimize the health impact of this problem by just continuing what we were doing during the pandemic. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate your questions here, Numair. Just a quick answer to the question about our project. So the first RCT concluded right before the pandemic struck. So we finished collecting all the willingness to pay. It was all incentivized. So the BDM exercises were done in February, and so this was just before like the lockdown. So we don't see any kinds of like spillover effects of the pandemic on mask willingness to pay there. But the second one just concluded last month. So Shotaro would probably have a better sense of like what the figures are, but from what I recall, that people like once they get the information, once they're fully aware what the purpose that the mask serves, then they do engage in avoidance behavior and the willingness to pay goes up. And in the last RCT, what we did notice is that some households do have masks in their homes, and they do wear them if they have that mask available. And that willingness to pay does shift once this information is provided to them. So once they're treated, I think their willingness to take up those masks goes up. So that's a public good provision problem, right? Markets are not gonna, given the retail price of the masks, many people are not gonna like get that good. So how do we increase access? I mean, that's where we feel like even small subsidies can help greater take up of the masks. So point well taken. Saba, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I won't take much time. It's already so late. Just have two comments. I think when we talk about the evidence-based decision making, data input is also very important. What data we are inputting in whatever model. So if we particularly talk about Imran's presentation and you're talking about the residential side, I think if I look into what kind of data can be provided into, so the development statistics talks about the cooking fuel consumption, so definitely that will be used for that. Okay, if we further dig it down to the urban and rural sector, then the rural sector has a higher share, like 80% share, while the people are using cooking fuel as wood, charcoal, or the sticks. So considering that 80% share of the rural sector, would it be enough to present something to propose something for the Lahore city? So I think such kind of analysis needs to further dig down before coming to any decisions, because it's a matter of evidence-based decision making. So the second comment to the respected sir is that when we talk about the legal sector, there are a lot of gaps, but one thing I found out, maybe I'm wrong, it's about the accountability is somehow missed in the policy frameworks. There's no KPIs and everything. But one thing I found in the Pakistan climate change policy section 14, which talks about the indemnity, it links basically the punitive measures with the good faith. If something is done in the good faith, then it's fine. And there is no definition of good faith. So how can you do the accountability on the basis of that? So I think these kind of issues are also very important when you're planning or giving certain regulatory frameworks. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah,
regarding the type of emissions that we're seeing if we look at all across Pakistan. Because when you talk about clean cooking stoves, I've been like associated with this profession long enough to know that clean cooking stoves have multiple times been tried in Pakistan and they've always failed because the continuity isn't there, and the willingness to pay for certain energy prices keeps on varying depending on what sort of crisis is going on in the country. But when we're looking at Peshawar, we looked at the household figures, and about 60% households in Peshawar used wood for cooking. So we knew that domestically there are parts of the country where, especially Peshawar's rural zones, do use wood a lot. And incidentally, I came across a paper. Pakistan is number 2 when it comes to using non-renewable forest resources, because, and number 1 is Afghanistan. So right after Afghanistan, Pakistan, especially northern Pakistan, and that all of that non-renewable forest resources is going to heating and cooking. There's no other use. In advance of that, during the last 2 years of gas crisis, even your big industrial sectors started using wood to burn when there was no coal available. So we have those sort of changes from year to year. And then, of course, when you're looking at cities, transport is still going to be the major chunk that should be targeted. But if you're looking at public health for the entire country, where you want to improve the lives of rest of Pakistanis as well, that is where you will have to make sure that they have clean fuel available. And clean fuel, not just in the sense that we, have cooking stoves, but I think it's time that at least we start with the bigger cities, that we mandate electric stoves. We make better uses of the energy that is available right now. A lot of it just gets burnt in our homes, especially, posh areas which have direct gas connections. But this is the time that we need to be packaging a lot of that gas and sending it as cylinders where people actually use the wood. So you have the benefit there. That is where energy transition will come. People over here in cities can pay for electric stoves, can pay for electricity. And last comment that I think we keep on coming back to bikes and rickshaws, and Dr. Pervez Hassan also pointed out that the initial Pakistan Clean Air Plan did come for 2-stroke to 4-stroke. I think that is where a lot of your electrification of the fleet has to happen. Because right now, the mileage for 1 unit of electricity is better than, is cheaper than what you would pay for a liter of petrol for a rickshaw or a bike. So we keep on talking about electric vehicles, and we keep on importing Audis and all those expensive cars, but we should be importing cheap electric bikes and rickshaws till we're able to manufacture them here, because that is where you will see the largest shift in emissions. And incidentally, it is cheaper for the rickshaw driver because he will have to consume less energy, pay for it less, simply change the battery every day, and that keeps on happening on a daily basis. So I think we all know the solutions, but we're implementing them in the wrong parts. So this is a puzzle that we seem to be placing the block in the triangle and the triangle in the block, and that keeps on extending the life of this problem. Otherwise, I think a lot of us know that not even resources, that we've discussed solutions for shower, and we've come to the conclusion that a lot of the solutions are not even financially that intensive. It's just who can do it, when they can do it, and what is the right location to put that intervention, and that is how you gradually start reducing these numbers. I agree with Imran Saab. I agree with EPD colleagues that Lahore, Peshawar, these are not the most polluted cities. What has happened is that we used to compete with the cities, and those cities have improved. So we're still there, but those cities have come down because they've started to implement these solutions, and we're still stagnant in terms of what policy interventions that we've implemented.
Last year, before I left LUMS, I had undergraduate students who did an independent study looking at adoption of electric rickshaws and motorcycles. Because that's where the largest gains are to be made, right? Not through like adoption of e-trons, but through like these smaller vehicles. But I think so in terms of just pure adoption of vehicles, or in the short run, there's large gains. But I think the larger challenge was putting in the infrastructure for charging, right? So those were the far more sort of in terms of a regulatory hurdle. That was a pretty costly hurdle to cross. So in terms of sort of simulations and looking at costs, but yeah, progress has to be made in that domain. All right, anyone else? Come on, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
Having a multidisciplinary kind of a session is because I'm an arts person, right? I'm not from the numbers and figures and research in the form that you guys do, right? So we do a lot of community-based work. We work with the people. Public good is something that is on the forefront for all the programming and those kind of things. What I would like to actually, it was very informative for me, and I'm taking away a lot of really important points. And one of the things which also surprised me was the stove. I'm sorry. But this is something on a separate level. This was something that was important to me because every time when we go living a privileged life, every time when you want to travel and see the world, you across Pakistan, you see everybody's living conditions, and you want to see what things can be implemented through my field, of course. And one of the things that was important for me was the stove design, right? So I would love to work on the stove design idea because I truly believe, where the problems are, the solutions also going to come from there. So we have done some research on this, of course, like I said, for different reasons, but I think they kind of overlap. And I'd be happy to work with you and look into this and work with the professionals from our medium to see how we can bring about those changes, but also localize these conditions because all different places use stove differently, right? And then, so we have some research on it that we can work with. Thank you.
On stoves, by the way, there's extensive research on stoves, and the first one was done in India where it completely failed. And there's mixed evidence from sub-Saharan Africa where there are like certain households where these kind of interventions have mixed, but that has involved a lot of follow-ups with households and ensuring that they're like sticking to it. And so at the end, I mean, it's not just providing a clean cook stove isn't enough. It requires a very sort of concerted effort to make sure that there's like long-term adoption. So, but you're right. I mean, if we were to experiment with something like that in Pakistan, it's not as easy as saying, oh yeah, people should just like get these clean cook stoves. You also have to understand that there's very mixed evidence on like adoption and its success, and that requires this like steady intervention. So yeah, I mean that's it's a good sort of starting point for that. Yeah.
Totally. And the other thing that we are working with, which I just want to bring to your attention, is also something that we're working with the School of Education at LUMS.
Yeah.
This is bringing climate education and ecological practices into schools. So we've done a pilot project which went very well, and our colleagues, our friends sitting over here from EPA, they've actually picked up the project and they would like to implement on a larger government-sized pilot project. We selected the Shadman area, and we're looking at public schools and private schools and bringing that education and practice in different forms, catered especially for the students and the schools, and in the process kind of localizing. My friend over here mentioned very eloquently that we need to localize, we need to talk about it, we need to address it, we need to localize the language, we need to localize the concerns, and then build the solution bottom upwards. So it's also something with WWF and LUMS and of course, the government, we working on this as well.
Great. Sarah, you want to have the last word? I saw you sort of.
Nationally Determined Contributions 2021, the NDCs,
Yeah.
has already started a solar stove project, pilot project in rural parts of the country. And as far as urban settings are concerned, like the best alternative would be induction stoves, really to gas stoves, but for that you
But aren't
need
the induction stoves
electricity.
horrifically expensive? They're like close to
And you need
$20,000 in the
electricity for
US.
it. So once again, I think it's cyclical. The
Yeah.
whole thing is cyclical. We're just
Yeah.
struggling with sustainable solutions.
Yeah. Right, great. Thank you. Before we conclude and head off for lunch, there's this excerpt that I want to read out. I read this out in our last workshop as well, but I find it super fascinating. So here it goes. It says, masses of stagnant air wrap the New York metropolitan area in a sooty blanket tonight, pushing the city's air pollution index past the danger point. The smog, which thickened as the night fell and the air became dense with automobile exhaust fumes, presented a general health hazard and a serious threat to persons with respiratory ailments. Austin Heller, the city's commissioner of pollution control, said the danger index reached 60.6 between 8 and 9 p.m., 5 times the normal amount of harmful materials in the air. The index measures the amount of sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide in the atmosphere. A reading of 50 is considered an indication of dangerous pollution. Heller said he was considering calling a first level alert in the city's air pollution warning system. This excerpt is from the Chicago Tribune in 1966. It's about to thank the great 1966 Thanksgiving smog that engulfed New York City and affected over 60 million people. And this became the catalyst for the 1970 Clean Air Act. And over those 50 years, Americans now experience the cleanest air that they've ever experienced since they started taking air quality readings in the country. And all that is down to effort by policymakers, by civil society, when they got together and decided that they need a concerted policy action towards cleaning up their air. And this was done not just at the federal level, but at the state and county levels. It was the county levels at which the Americans were able to make the greatest strides. So on that note, I use this as an example Hassan Saab, go ahead.
मैंने आज सबका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करना था और सिर्फ 2-3 मुख्तसर बातें करनी थी. सबसे पहले तो आमना ने give a very sort of comprehensive overview of the legislative and institutional framework. I think we have an excellent starting point on the framework of both law and regulations. We have EPAs, we have EIA, we have National Environmental Quality Standards, we have Pakistan Environment Protection Council. Think of anything, we have it. A good starting point. We've got a very, very cooperative judiciary. It's a boon. You don't have it in other countries. Pakistan's judiciary is one of the most environment friendly in the world, and I've documented this in many, many articles. So these are the plus points, but I was a bit surprised. I wanted to mention there was no discussion here today about the capacity building of the regulator. And if I have to really point out 2 things, or maybe 3, for all of you here, I'll put 3 things on the table. Avoid confrontation as much as you can. Chahe wo umar ho, chahe wo government ho, chahe wo kuch ho, we are all Pakistanis. We've all got to be convinced that what we are saying is good for most of us, not all. And my own realization is that once those that you conceive as adversaries are convinced that you're acting not for Parvez Hassan but for society at large, you see a conversion. मैं आपको छोटी सी मिसाल देता हूँ. When I was chairing the Climate Change Commission, बड़ी चीज़ें नहीं हो रही थी. I set up 6 committees और मैंने सब committees chair को कहा कि मुझे अपनी recommendations में से 3 सबसे अहम recommendations मुझे तुम दे दो. When I got 15 to 18 recommendations, I called up Jahan Zeb. Jahan Zeb was the chairman P&D. He was a member of the commission. I said, Jahan Zeb, I want a one-to-one with you with my chairs, and I need 2 hours of your time. So I put the 15 things on his table, and he says, Dr. Saab, मैं ये नहीं कर सकता या करूँगा, मैं कैबिनेट लेके जाऊँगा. मैंने कहा एक तरफ रख दो. Out of the 15 things I said, he could do 7. I said, I withdraw the 8. Can you do the 7? And the 7 got done. So really, you've got to move as a team player. You've got to understand कि उसकी क्या competence है, उसकी क्या SOPs हैं. So you move forward with that particular thing. And the final thing I wanted to say, and I think we should talk a little more about that, is that everything has to move with an intelligent, conscientious citizenry. जब तक अवाम बिल्कुल educated नहीं होंगे और नहीं, it's senseless really the amount. You see, you go to a school, 300 बच्चे बच्ची हैं वहाँ, 300 गाड़ियाँ आती हैं वहाँ. There's no such thing as a carpool. There's no public transportation. So we've got to change the dynamics of our decision-making process. What he was mentioning, personal choices, wastages that take place in our houses, stoves, everything. So I think one has to move for a capacity building of administrators. ये EPDs में सारे EPDs के साथ मैंने काम किया, मैंने सबके दफ्तरों में जाके देखा, उनके पास कोई इक्विपमेंट कोई नहीं है. लाहौर में जब हम स्मॉक कमीशन में थे, only 6 monitoring units, whereas Lahore needed 30 to monitor air quality. So if you don't have the equipment, you don't have the laboratories, you don't have the scientists, how do you administer a law? So I am, as one who has a lot of experience internationally, the legislation here is not perfect, but it's doable. Don't tinker with it. Spend that much time on building the capacity of your administrators, the EPDs. उनके पास कख नहीं पड़ा हुआ. I could have been far more effective in my life if the environment service in Pakistan was an attractive one. I'm ineffective in many cases because each time I sit on the table with my 5 or 6 EPD chairs or secretaries, वो तबादला हो चुका होता है. So you go into the EP department as a last choice. For the first time in my life, and it's over 45 years, I get a telephone call from the Federal Secretary of Climate Change. डॉक्टर साहब मैंने आपसे मिलना है. कहते जी मैंने गवर्नमेंट से खुद रिक्वेस्ट की है. I've never seen this happen. Never seen this happen. मैंने गवर्नमेंट से खुद रिक्वेस्ट की है कि मुझे एनवायरनमेंट क्लाइमेट चेंज में लगाओ और मुझे कम से कम 3 साल दो because I wanted to go. Now I haven't seen that kind of a commitment. Most people come in, 3 महीने के बाद transfer while they are Secretary Environment Punjab, they are trying to get into becoming something else. So if the environment becomes attractive in the ministries, in the departments, and there is continuity of people, I think we will be far more effective. ये जो बात कर रहे हैं confrontation, हमारी commission नहीं. We all work as a team. You should not look at it as an adversary. We are just trying to assist him to do his job better. And my last story is, on one of my commissions, the highest ranking civil servant of Punjab was with me on this table here. And we decided on this table कि जो पुल जो बने हैं नहर के ऊपर ये गलत बने हैं, underpasses. I could show through road traffic engineers that it was wrong. Now, I talked about a consensus. I was feeling very uncomfortable. मैंने कहा ये सरकारी बंद है, अब वो कैसे कहेगा, चीफ मिनिस्टर कहेगा, तूने कैसे दस्तखत कर दिए इसको? But he saw that it was the right decision. Believe you me, he signed off कि गवर्नमेंट ने गलत किया है. The highest functionary in the government signing off. मैंने उसको फ़ोन किया, मैंने कहा मैंने तुझे मिलना है, कहते डॉक्टर मैं फ़ौरन आपके दफ्तर आता हूँ. I went to his office just to hug him. I said, you'll be sacked by this evening. So, but I do want to thank you for what you did. He went on to become the Secretary of Establishment. I think he died last year. But one of the most impressive civil servants I've worked with. Huh? Anyway, so I've tried to suggest some stories out of my life, and they really are happy stories. मुझे कहीं जिद नजर नहीं आई, मुझे कहीं I didn't see obstinacy, I didn't see stubbornness. I just saw a willingness कि बताओ where am I wrong, और बता देते कि यार मैं नहीं कर सकता. जैसे जहांगीर ने मुझे कहा कि ये मैं नहीं कर सकता, मुझे कैबिनेट के पास ले जाना पड़ेगा. And I just took off the table what he could not do, and I settled for the 7 that he could do. And he did it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, sir. Aslam sir, final quick
मुझे सब पता है कि
अच्छा दोस्तों, बेसिकली ट्विटर पे लड़ाइयाँ कम करो और हाथ पकड़ के पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद के नारे ज़्यादा लगाओ. Okay. So, all right, see you at lunch. It's at the EDH. Yeah.
last